I internalized that as opportunity. Like we had such a responsibility to this audience to deliver something and to have the opportunity to deliver something for a passionate group of people.
Yes.
As someone who is so deeply passionate myself, I was so excited about that. I would so much rather have that than people who are.
In Hollywood's dazzling but often predictable landscape, some things feel as constant as the laws of nature. Stars headline billion-dollar franchises, studios guard their crown jewels, and Ryan Reynolds, with his effortless wit and iconic role as Deadpool, seemed untouchable, practically Hollywood royalty. That's why the announcement hit with the force of an earthquake. Marvel Studios had fired him. Not rumors, not whispers, but confirmed, undeniable fact. The word fired reverberated like a thunderclap. In an industry where loyalty to A-list talent is almost sacred, Reynolds' exit was something no one thought possible. This wasn't spun as creative differences or softened with polite PR language. It was sharp, decisive, and impossible to ignore. At the heart of the fallout lay a storm of digital evidence, bluntly labeled receipts, and a surprising new player, filmmaker Justin Baldoni. Until now, his name had been linked to an entirely different project. But suddenly, he was at the center of the storm, holding information that connected not only to Reynolds, but also to his wife, Blake Lively. The question that spread from studio boardrooms to fans online was brutal in its simplicity. How did Ryan Reynolds, the face of Marvel's future and a fixture of Hollywood's elite, collapse so quickly? What hidden forces could bring down a star at the very height of his career? Industry insiders whispered that the truth was buried in those receipts, evidence strong enough to pierce Hollywood's polished armor and reveal the fractures beneath its carefully managed image machine.
I'm also more honored that because, what we're talking about is so important and so meaningful that we're able to have this much anticipation and so many people want to go see it and are talking about it. Like, that's what I'm grateful for.
And you had a key part in bringing it to the big screen. How did this all come to be?
Well, in 2019, I read the book. I was sent the book by my book agent and friend at the time, and I was looking for films that could inspire, that were commercially viable, but also could really reach in.
Ryan Reynolds. 4 years, his very name was shorthand for Hollywood's most polished qualities: effortless charm, razor-sharp humor, and undeniable box office pull. He wasn't just another leading man, he was the full package, carefully shaped into a persona audiences felt they knew. The quick-witted interviews, the self-deprecating jokes, the kind of charisma that made him seem both larger than life and strangely approachable, all of it combined into a brand as carefully built as any Marvel franchise itself. Deadpool wasn't just his role, it was an extension of his identity, proof that Reynolds could bend an entire genre to his will. At the peak of this success, his standing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe seemed untouchable. His future looked limitless, his reputation spotless. Studios didn't just like him, they relied on him. Fans didn't just watch his movies, they championed him. By every measure, Reynolds was a cornerstone of Hollywood's golden image, but as often happens in this industry, the glimmering surface began to crack. Marvel Studios isn't known for cutting ties with its biggest stars on a whim. When the studio that guards its crown jewels with near-religious caution makes a clean break, it signals something far heavier than creative differences. This wasn't a minor scheduling conflict or an ego clash wrapped neatly in a press release. It was swift. It was calculated. And it pointed to something deeply unsettling behind the curtain. Quiet industry chatter soon picked up speed. At first, it sounded like nothing more than background noise, vague whispers about growing tension, hints that Reynolds' polished exterior concealed something more chaotic beneath. But those whispers gained direction, centering on one unexpected figure, director Justin Baldoni. What had been considered just another small-scale passion project suddenly emerged as ground zero for a much bigger reckoning. In a matter of weeks, the project Baldoni was steering became the lens through which all the rumors crystallized. And with it came the possibility that this wasn't just a personal stumble for Reynolds, it was the kind of scandal that could dismantle the empire he had spent decades carefully constructing, shaking both his brand and the Marvel machine that once treated him as indispensable.
Kind of cast it as, oh, he's losing his marbles. Had I known, I think I would have handled it better. I think I would have been a much more patient person. I think my father would have felt.
At first, the conflict looked like little more than a contained spark, the kind of behind-the-scenes tension that Hollywood has weathered countless times before. A creative clash on set, a few bruised egos, nothing that couldn't be smoothed over with polished PR. The spotlight initially landed on two central figures, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, known for weaving heartfelt, emotionally charged stories that resonate with audiences craving authenticity, was stepping into one of his most ambitious undertakings yet, adapting a beloved novel rich with vulnerability and dramatic weight. Across from him stood Blake Lively, a household name whose effortless relatability, poised elegance, and undeniable on-screen pull had earned her both critical praise and public affection. Cast as the lead, her partnership with Baldoni looked like a Hollywood match made in heaven. His reputation for empathy-driven storytelling seemed perfectly aligned with her approachable, star-powered presence. Early marketing only reinforced this perception. Promotional footage showcased smiling exchanges and carefully curated soundbites, painting a picture of harmony and collaboration. Fans were buzzing, convinced that this pairing promised something special, a rare alignment of talent, vision, and chemistry. On the surface, it all looked seamless, but beneath that glossy exterior, something different was unfolding. Whispers from within the industry hinted at growing strain. Lively, insiders claimed, was becoming increasingly uneasy, despite the cheerful red carpet appearances and upbeat interviews. The source of this discomfort, they suggested, was Baldoni's expanding role. He wasn't just directing, he was reshaping dialogue, steering narrative choices, and, most controversially, stepping into a lead role himself. While multi-hyphenate involvement isn't unusual in Hollywood, it altered the creative balance in ways that reportedly unsettled Lively. What she had envisioned as a spotlight role suddenly felt shared, even overshadowed. What began as subtle unease gradually hardened into a quiet tug-of-war over control and influence. Behind the polished smiles and promotional unity, a silent battle of egos was already unfolding. And with each passing day, those small fractures in the partnership widened, planting the seeds for an unraveling that would soon extend far beyond a single film set, threatening Hollywood's carefully staged image of effortless collaboration.
Just read it, because I was looking for movies that could be commercial and speak to the human experience. And
Were you reading romance novels?
And I had never read a romance novel.
Never?
And she said, just trust me, read it. So I read it, and by the end of the book, I couldn't even read the text on the page because I was crying so much. My wife was in bed next to me, and she's, like, that snot coming out.
What started as whispers of on-set unease quickly refused to stay hidden. The quiet murmurs slipped into the open, transforming from faint gossip into pointed accusations that began reshaping the story in ways no one saw coming. At first, both insiders and casual fans brushed it off as standard Hollywood friction, the kind of personality clashes and creative disputes that come with long hours and high stakes. Normally, these tensions fade once the cameras stop rolling. But this time, the situation only escalated. In a move that stunned the industry, Blake Lively chose to take the dispute public. She accused director Justin Baldoni not of artistic disagreements, but of orchestrating a deliberate effort to sabotage her career. According to her, Baldoni fed carefully timed leaks to the press, crafting a narrative that painted her as demanding, temperamental, and impossible to work with. In Hollywood, that label isn't just unflattering, it can be career-ending. The accusation struck a chord. For decades, powerful male directors have been accused of manipulating reputations at the expense of female stars, and many saw Lively's claims as yet another example of that pattern. Headlines amplified her side of the story, and social media conversations exploded with support. Baldoni was cast as the domineering filmmaker, Lively, as the actress fighting to defend her agency in a system stacked against her. The framing was familiar, powerful, and, at first glance, unshakable. Public sympathy swung heavily in Lively's favor. Commentators praised her courage, while fans rallied around her as the victim of a toxic imbalance of power. The narrative seemed airtight, Blake versus the machinery of a patriarchal Hollywood. But beneath that groundswell of support, something was already shifting. Behind closed doors, evidence was quietly accumulating. Digital receipts, undeniable, time-stamped, and precise, waited in the wings. When they finally surfaced, they wouldn't just dispute Lively's version of events, they would upend the carefully constructed roles of victim and villain. What had begun as a seemingly straightforward story of injustice was about to be torn wide open, plunging the scandal into a far more volatile, unpredictable chapter.
People and humanity are inherently good. and they crave nutritious food in their soul.
Just when it seemed Blake Lively's story had cemented itself in the public imagination, with her cast as the wronged star and Justin Baldoni branded the familiar Hollywood villain, the narrative took a stunning and unexpected turn. Baldoni's team, far from caught off guard, appeared to have been preparing for this moment all along. What followed wasn't a vague rebuttal or spin. It was a calculated counterstrike, armed with evidence that cut straight through the heart of Lively's claims. Their weapon was not rumor or speculation, but hard proof, text messages, meticulously time-stamped, preserved, and released with precision. These weren't whispers from anonymous sources, they were digital receipts, and they carried the weight of undeniable truth. And what they revealed wasn't the image of a silenced actress fighting back against an oppressive director. Instead, they suggested something far more complicated, even unsettling. The logs painted Lively not as the target of a smear campaign, but as a central force driving the conflict. Messages showed her making firm demands, insisting on script changes, and pressing for decisions that tilted the project in her favor. In several exchanges, she invoked the enormous influence of her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and his Hollywood network power she implied could be summoned if her terms weren't respected. In one striking moment, she referred to these allies as her dragons, a metaphor that underscored the sheer force she believed she could command. This wasn't the voice of an actress quietly struggling against imbalance. It was the voice of a seasoned industry player, leveraging both her celebrity and her connections to reshape the project to her vision. The texts pointed to efforts to dictate not just creative direction, but marketing strategies and even the public narrative surrounding the production. In the raw light of those receipts, the once solid framing of Lively as victim began to fracture. The sympathetic portrait of a marginalized woman facing down an overbearing director gave way to a more complex reality, one where she wielded considerable power and wasn't afraid to use it. What had looked like a classic David versus Goliath struggle now flipped entirely. Blake Lively was no longer the oppressed, but a calculating strategist navigating Hollywood's brutal ecosystem with ambition, leverage, and unapologetic self-interest. The carefully built facade of victimhood collapsed, replaced by a far more layered and potentially damaging portrayal, not the silenced star, but the power broker pulling strings in the shadows.
Frank, if it were not for women giving me direct feedback in my own personal life and being a man who was willing to at least listen to them, there's no chance that I would be having this conversation. So the message, to answer your question, the message is very simple. As men, we need to embrace all of the parts of us that make us human. That's it.
As the storm between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni intensified, all eyes initially stayed fixed on the two of them. Ryan Reynolds, at first, seemed to linger quietly on the edges, present, yes, but blurred, a background figure whose role was left open to interpretation. His silence allowed room for speculation. Was he simply offering quiet support as any spouse might? Or was that silence itself a calculated strategy, a way to maintain distance publicly while still pulling strings privately? For weeks, the ambiguity worked in his favor. Blake often invoked his name and influence, but skeptics wondered whether she was exaggerating his involvement to strengthen her position. Fans debated endlessly. Was Reynolds exercising careful restraint, choosing not to intervene, or was he quietly shaping the game behind closed doors while the feud between his wife and Baldoni consumed the spotlight? That uncertainty gave him cover, preserving his reputation as Hollywood's affable everyman, but that shield didn't last. Soon, a fresh wave of evidence surfaced, this time, not Blake's texts, but Ryan's. Digital receipts tied directly to him shattered the illusion of neutrality. Far from a passive observer, he emerged as a co-strategist, working alongside Lively to steer the narrative. The logs pointed to phone calls with high-powered contacts, strategies to quietly plant unfavorable stories about Baldoni, and even notes on shaping sympathetic media angles that recast Blake as a misunderstood heroine rather than an overreaching star. The revelations cut deep. Reynolds's carefully cultivated persona, the witty, self-deprecating figure beloved for warmth and relatability, suddenly cracked. The man adored as Hollywood's everyman was revealed in another light, a skilled operator, comfortable leveraging influence and back-channel tactics to protect his family's image. Whispers turned into headlines, and headlines into industry shockwaves. For a brief moment, The feud was no longer just Blake versus Baldoni, it was about Ryan, too. Then Baldoni dropped the real bombshell. He claimed to hold an even more comprehensive set of receipts, full, time-stamped records detailing Reynolds' awareness of and participation in smear tactics designed to undermine him. The mere suggestion of these files sent tremors through Marvel Studios. Reynolds wasn't just any actor on their roster, he was a cornerstone, the face of one of their most profitable franchises. If the allegations were true, the implications weren't just embarrassing, they were catastrophic. Marvel moved quickly. Insiders described urgent, high-level meetings as executives reviewed Baldoni's evidence. While the full content wasn't made public immediately, those who saw it called it damning. The logs reportedly showed direct coordination between Ryan and Blake to manage press coverage and manipulate public opinion, with hints of broader patterns of backroom pressure tactics. For Marvel, that was the breaking point. The decision came swiftly. In an uncharacteristically blunt statement, Marvel announced it was severing ties with Reynolds. The wording was clear, almost cold. After reviewing newly disclosed material, his continued involvement was no longer tenable. Just like that, one of Hollywood's most bankable stars was out. The reaction was instant. Social media exploded in disbelief. Fans who once considered Reynolds untouchable struggled to grasp how the face of Deadpool, a man with a career seemingly wrapped in Teflon, could be dismissed overnight. Some called Marvel's move an overreaction, arguing that PR spin and damage control could have salvaged the situation. Others praised it as a bold act of accountability, a warning shot to Hollywood power players who had long believed themselves immune to consequences. Through it all, Baldoni projected restraint. He didn't gloat. Instead, he released more logs to clarify the timeline, framing his actions as a matter of protecting his integrity and safeguarding his team. The calm posture only strengthened his credibility. Meanwhile, Blake Lively vanished. Once a constant voice online, she went silent, fueling speculation that she and Ryan were scrambling behind closed doors. The blow deepened when her attorney abruptly cut ties, citing irreconcilable differences over her version of events, a development insiders read as its own kind of evidence. Marvel's decision sent shockwaves through Hollywood. If the studio could cut loose someone as valuable as Ryan Reynolds, it signaled a shift in the balance of power. No name, no matter how bankable, was untouchable. Contracts, reputations, and star power suddenly felt more fragile than ever. For Reynolds, the fallout was devastating. His brand, built on charm, humor, and accessibility, now stood in ruins, overshadowed by the cold precision of digital proof. The lesson was undeniable. In an age of texts, emails, and receipts, no image is invincible. The lingering questions remain. Can Reynolds rebuild? Will he offer an apology, a defense, or an explanation that reshapes the narrative? Or is this the kind of scandal that carves a permanent scar across a career once thought untouchable? For now, one truth is impossible to ignore. When an empire as vast as Marvel decides a star is no longer worth the risk, the door doesn't simply close. It slams shut, fast, final, and with the entire world watching.